In every single title and expansion of the Monster Hunter series, each game's roster has one member in particular that is put into the highlight way more than the rest. Formerly known as Flagships, those monsters are frequently presented in its game's marketing and possess a somewhat higher relevance in either gameplay or narrative in the entry they belong to. Nergigante, Velkhana, Magnamalo and Malzeno are all the Flagships of the 5th generation. But beyond those 4 there have been many others with the same role throughout the 20 years of the franchise's existence. From Gore Magala to Brachydios, zinogre, tigrex, nargacuga and even Rathalos. 6 times! Due to their special treatment, they are naturally amongst the most recognizable and popular monsters the IP has to offer. But despite all of this, it is still unclear why these specifically were chosen and what for. Do they serve a more important purpose in its respective debut title, or are they more of a mascot than anything else? For starters, we need to accurately identify and categorize what this role is exactly in order to fully understand what their main goals are. Like I said before, this specific set of bosses is deliberately selected by the developers themselves as representatives of the title they are attached to. They appear on the covers, promotional material like trailers or ads, as well as traditional merchandise. One very predominant pattern that it can be considered as a rule in this case is that flagships are directly correlated to the game they are introduced. This basically means that no flagship monster is debuted in the title prior to the one they represent, with the exception of course of Rathalos, since he is essentially the poster boy of the entire franchise. But seriously, Capcom, 6 times? Another somewhat consistent aspect of this class, though less reliable, is their role in the game's narrative. Even though that is achieved in numerous ways, these monsters are often an important piece of the puzzle of their respective story, with variable levels of importance depending on the title in question, usually having multiple encounters with the player character, making them a more or less glorified and prolonged tutorial of sorts, where throughout the course of the narrative, the monster increases in power to serve as a continuous obstacle, preparing the hunter for the arduous and progressively more difficult late game. This was very tangible in some titles like Try, For Ultimate and World, but several others had this component implemented in one way or another. Keep in mind that I'm not necessarily saying that they succeeded in every instance they did this. Some obviously nailed it better than most, but in many sequels this trend is accurately observable. It just didn't work all that well in a few of them. This utilization of the most famous monster of each game is actually a really smart move from both a mechanical and psychological standpoint. By repeatedly placing a very hard challenge through numerous stages of the player's progression, it allows them to slowly but gradually gain the knowledge and skill necessary to defeat said monster. This can be heavily beneficial to keep the difficulty curve stable during the entire playthrough, hence why I personally believe that the past 5 flagships have been Elder Dragons on purpose, because since that category of monsters for most of the endgame and their power and mechanics are significantly higher than the rest of the roster, by constantly introducing the same Elder Dragon will, in theory at least, give players the opportunity to learn how to deal with them in a general sense, so once they actually achieve endgame, the difficulty discrepancy is not as large as it would without this. The best example of this, and also arguably the best designed flagship the series ever had, was Gore Magala in 4 Ultimate. Story-wise, Gore appears a total of 5 times, with each encounter gradually and significantly increasing the difficulty of the fight. Its first appearance happens as an urgent quest in Caravan 3 Star, when the hunter and its crew were sailing the Great Sea and were ambushed by the, at the time in the campaign, never seen monster. This whole quest is extremely unique on multiple levels. The map itself is the Caravanier's ship, a very small vessel which will never be used again. And not only that, Due to the large size of Magala, the entire fight is highly claustrophobic and visually confusing for the simple fact that the damn monster basically fills the entire boat. That was on purpose, because Capcom wanted players to be caught by surprise and feel trapped and overwhelmed. Don't forget, this happens at Star 3. The hardest things we were hunting at that point were Gendroms, Tetsukabras and Bazariuses. So imagine going from that to fighting an Elder Dragon level threat in an extremely small area, starting with a beast right in your face, having nowhere to go, unable to retreat and knowing literally nothing about this monster, what it does and how it moves. Fortunately for us, the objective is only to repel it, and it is a lot easier to do it here than in any other hunt in the future. But this quest was extremely important for the game's progression and covered two crucial aspects. For one, it sets a very clear target for the player. At this time, Gore was by far the most dangerous monster we faced, and the fact that it wasn't defeated but rather repelled instantly let us know that it will appear again in the future. And thus, hunters must not only remain vigilant, but more so prepare for the inevitable rematch with it, which obviously ended up happening. And second, this rampant encounter showed players that, in terms of difficulty and mechanical complexity, there was more to the game than what they were expecting at that point. With that quest, they learned that what they were hunting before was nothing compared to what they were going to face later. And while the following 3 hunts with it are a lot more standard and more aligned to the normal quest we are used to, on the last match, it does it again in a more dramatized fashion. Now, it is no longer Gore Magala, but Shagaru Magala, its adult and final form. In this quest, we face this nemesis one last time in the Sanctuary Arena at the top of Heaven's Mount. Just like the first time, you have nowhere to go, and once you enter, you cannot leave. Ignoring forecasts, of course. But this time, both of you are on equal footing. Both fully prepared and at the peak of your power. Throughout the entire low and high rank, both the Hunter and Magala grew together, becoming stronger and stronger, continuously trying to outcompete each other. This final battle really doesn't feel like a hunt, but rather a duel. A fight to, at long last, determine which one of you is superior, who will stand and who will fall. Using the game's flagship monster like this is absolutely genius, and is an amazing way to help the entire game's progression feel smoother and more thematically meaningful. Assuming that Wilds will follow the Elder Dragon trend for its flagship, it would be highly beneficial in my opinion if they did something similar to this in the first 6th generation title. Having a dangerous monster enter the scene very early and gradually grow in power at the same rate as the player would not only provide the hunter with a consistent obstacle that they can compare the improvement to, but also add somewhat of a personal touch. After all, having a nemesis in-game can very easily create a level of attachment. Now, one thing that I don't want them to redo, and I believe most of you will agree with me, is both making the flagship the centerpiece of the entire story and making it a world-level threat. That concept is not inherently bad, of course, it did work before, so there's no reason why it wouldn't work again, but saving the world several times is making that plot a bit too saturated if you ask me. And putting the game's flagship as a fundamental part of said plot doesn't help it either. The monster should be dangerous, obviously, but in my opinion, it should be mostly dangerous to you. Having a unique, special and personal connection with it is a great way to create emotional investment into the title in question, and making that component of the story personal is the best way to do that. A huge thank you to my Patreon supporters for supporting the channel and the content I create. If you want to join the ranks, you can do so for only $1 a month, the link will be in the description. Don't forget to leave your thoughts and opinions down below, join our Discord server, engage with the community, and I hope to see you all next time.